Some of these slides I'm going to whip through pretty quick. They're basically some background knowledge for some audiences I give talks to don't understand some of these concepts. I would say at times it's like looking for a needle in the haystack, looking for the one thing that answers all of our questions. And it's one of those subjects, the more you dig, the more lost you get. I kind of joked to Jerry Scherson at times on some of the stuff, why did I get into this stuff? I'm going to cover a couple topics today quickly. Fatty acid profile, free fatty acids, and then a bit on some of our work that we worked on lipid peroxidation. These are background components that everybody here knows about. One thing on the second bullet point, which as I dug into this, everybody knows this, it's variable in fatty acid composition and some of the quality measures, MIU, that we would consider as quality measures. But we have more and more options for alternative, in this case, alternative fats or lipids. I remember I got a call not so long ago, what is the caloric value of trap grease? One, I didn't even know what trap grease was. The brown grease there. And of course, restaurant grease or yellow grease. And some of this work started when distillers corn oil was started, some acid oils, and I've not really worked on algae oil or something like that. And then the other question was, well, if it's high in free fatty acid, it must mean it's rancid. I go, well, that's not necessarily the case. You can have high free fatty acids and not peroxidation products. The interest is, as pigs get leaner, you have more impact of the diet on fat composition versus de novo. If we go down to the second bullet point, back when we had distillers with a high amount of fat in them, of course that would affect fat quality, in this case the pig. The pig, according to some data I had, is getting more unsaturated. Again, alternative sources. And then some of the work we've done in conjunction with the University of Illinois is how does peroxidation products, or do they impact shelf life further processing? I worked with Illinois on that. I spent about 2.5 years on the swine NRC. And the way energy is calculated in the swine NRC is based upon the Powell's equation. I'm just using DE here. That equation utilizes a free fatty acid component and then a unsaturated to saturation ratio. That's basically what the component is, or the equation is. Most of their work was utilizing soy-based, canola-based, and I believe it was tallow-based research, either the fat or the acid oils. And palm, of course, they used that. So that was the basis of their data input into this equation. Really some nice work. And then on NRC, we modified DE to ME and ME to the net just using some equations or some conversions. The basis of his research, he did a lot of really good stuff in both birds and pigs. And if we go over here to a low free fatty acid component here, as you get more unsaturated, so as you go from a palm or tallow based up to a soy based, you get an improvement in the energy value. That would be right here. The largest improvement is based upon digestibility. As you go from a low free fatty acid to a high free fatty acid, you can see that these values shift down versus the low free fatty acids. And the biggest, and the animal that reacts most to that is the young bird. All animals react, but the bird's the biggest, and of course the younger pig is not quite so bad. So that's been kind of a standard for predicting energy of fats. U to S ratio, free fatty acids, and again, it's a lipid digestibility. As I started to work on this, and then distiller's oil started coming into the picture, we would have conversations with Jerry Scherson that you need to work on corn oil, you need to work on corn oil. And I go, well, Jerry, corn oil doesn't even show up in the pie chart of oils being used. So we had a lot of discussions on that. And Jerry and I are good friends, and he lives in the world of distillers. But I love quizzing kids from school, Iowa State, what's the number one oil used in the world? And this is for cooking, world basis. So the first thing is they say corn. I go, try again. And then they go canola, because they're thinking of some. I go, at least think of Iowa. My God. So they come up with soybeans. I go, no. I go, in fact, palm oil is the largest one used throughout the world. North and South America, soybeans. The rest of the world, palm. And then a few of the others there. So that's where you see some of my thinking shift away from a North American approach or an Iowan approach to a worldwide basis. And you're going to see some of that interest here, or info here. These are the fatty acid ratios of various fat sources on the left there, going from coconut down to canola. In the U to S ratio, excuse me, all that does is sum up the unsaturated versus the saturated, the U to S ratio. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter the fatty acid length or anything like that. The free fatty acid component is just percent free fatty acids. It has no relationship to the carbon lengths of those free fatty acids. So if you have the U to S ratio and assume a free fatty acid component, you can predict the amount of energy. So U to S, you plot it in there, assume a 5% free fatty acids, you can predict the energy in those lipids. And again, I've marked tallow, lard, and soy because those are the ones that Dr. Powell's used for generation of his equation. If you think of this, and then you look at how fats can be hydrogenated, some of Jack Oldham's work here is he'd hydrogenated basically a tallow or choice white grease, an animal fat. He then fed graded levels of that relative to soybean oil. So here in this component, digestibility in the black of 100% soybean oil was basically ballpark about 80%. As the increased amount of what he called fully hydrogenated animal fat to where you have 100% of the animal fat fed, digestibility, he called it 0. As I look at this data a bit more, it's really about minus 10%. So fat's got negative energy. So kind of think on that one a bit. He said it was fully hydrogenated. It was not fully hydrogenated. It was really about 30% 16O and say 60% 18O. A U to S ratio of 0.15. So is U to S ratio important? You'd say, well, U to S ratio of 0.15 has 0 energy. A U to S ratio of 0.15 palm kernel oil or coconut oil, you'd say would have poor digestibility. You go, no, Brian, it's the fatty acid lengths that are important. Palm kernel and coconut oil are more medium chains. They're digested more. So that's where I come in, and I think that the equation needs a little tweaking based upon carbon lengths in the lipid and carbon lengths in the free fatty acid profile. And I'll show you why I think that needs a little bit tweaking here later on. So I'm not saying it's wrong, I think it just needs to be modified. Here's some work that John Patience and Trey Kellner did at Iowa State. Various fats on the left side there, where they went from coconut clear down to canola. I've got these listed from chain lengths or U to S ratio down to a high U to S ratio here. They did this work in 15 kilo pigs and 13 kilo pigs and 50 kilo pigs, and determine energy on it. You can see they vary by fat. That's no big surprise. At times, a little bit surprising that some of the differences are quite large. So here's a fish oil, the same fish oil, by the way, here to here. So in some cases, the 50 kilo pig had a greater energy value of the fat, in other cases less. Trey and I have had a lot of conversations on this in the past. Yeah, squint back there. One thing we don't ever put on some of our values is the error associated with the values. And that's one of the things I think we're missing out on. Nor when we think of the Powell's equation, we don't put the error associated with the prediction of that energy value. I used the exact same fats that Trey did. Basically, he got in 55-gallon drums of it and used like 5 gallons. And I can't throw anything away, so I decided to do a little different type of study. Trey did them individually fed, a little different methodology. I took these same oils to a commercial feed mill and put it in at, it's kind of a weird number, 7.1%, and had those pelleted. Why 7%? Well, I'm a 10% guy, but I got to the feed mill and they basically says you are not putting 10% fat in the diet because it's not going to flow back out. So I started pulling fat out, so they agreed to a level that we could agree with. Here's what's interesting to me. Same exact fat sources. Yeah, they'd been stored a while, but the peroxidation profiles really did not change. They were in the cold, they're in the dark, a couple things you need for peroxidation. And you can see, in many cases, the predictive values that I got, or excuse me, the values I got were quite a bit different than what Trey got. So we've had a lot of discussion of why. Because you guys need a number, the so-called number with maybe some error about it. Likewise, you can predict the value of those fats based upon the equation. So this is one of those cases where Trey did the work, we did the work, and we got a predictive value, and they don't match up. So again, that's one of my conversations when I have with fellow colleagues is question, what am I doing wrong? Or where can we reduce error in some of our research to get more consistent values?